Hello there, this is Mr. Williams, and I am putting together this presentation to help us understand some of the important points in chapters 1 through 8 of Huckleberry Finn. First question, what is the significance of the chapter title, Chapter 1, I Discover Moses and the Bulrushes? Well, the title exemplifies Huck's ignorance of society conventions. Here, societal conventions are symbolized by the biblical story about Moses. The the episode also highlights Huck's boyish charm. Most children Huck's age would have received, and still today probably still have received, some kind of Sunday school training, which would include the unspoken lesson that these people, like Moses, who died long ago, are important. Significance of Huck's encounter with a spider in chapter 1. Well, it introduces the motif of superstition, which will be at times contrasted with intelligence, and at other times it will be contrasted with religion. Earlier in chapter 1, Huck had dismissed the story of Moses, saying, quote, I don't take no stock in dead people, end quote, and said that he wished he were in the, quote, bad place, an allusion to Christian hell. The episode with the spider also counterbalances Huck's common sense, where we will see all the time. The episode suggests that Huck has a native intelligence that withstands the pressures of society, but he is vulnerable to superstition. Jim, the introduction to Jim. Jim is going to be the second most important character in the book, a vital character. Well, the introduction to Jim shows that he's guarding Miss Watson's home. Does this make Jim a vigilant and brave character? Well, because we're only seeing the episode through Huck's eyes, we don't see that vigilance or we don't see that bravery. To Huck, he still or at this point, just sees Jim as a piece of property, not as a man. At this point, Huck has accepted society's attitude towards blacks. The significance of Jim's story about the witches. Well, it introduces the motif of tall tales. This was a common form of expression along the western frontier. These were stories that were characterized by exaggeration and elements of violence, and often including successful use of trickery. Jim's tale here brings him prestige and power among the blacks and helps to explain away his fear. Ransom. Well, what is the significance of the episode with Ransom? Well, Tom doesn't know what ransom means, but he is absolutely positive, completely sure that it must be done. They must ransom the women, even if they have to ransom them to death, as absurd as that is. The boys don't know what it means either, yet they defer to Tom, and they still use this idea of ransom as the basis for an adventure anyway. As satire, Twain is poking fun or satirizing the many who act without understanding. Also, satirizing those who cling tight to any tradition or, quote, right and proper way to do something, as Tom does, even when they don't understand it. And as foreshadowing, this episode foreshadows the feud between the Grangerfords and the Shepherdsons, which will come in chapters 17, 18, 19. Tom and Huck. Well, clearly there's some similarities, but Huck is a realist. He's a pragmatist, while Tom is a romantic dreamer. The whole business about the Arab ambush fits into that. Huck doesn't go for it, and yet Tom says there were elephants and genies and all kinds of nonsense. Huck gains his knowledge from his own experience, and in that regard, he's rather remarkable. He doesn't get second-hand knowledge. Tom's knowledge is all second-hand. His is from books, as the whole ransom episode indicates earlier. Now, Huck thinks that Tom is clearly the leader, but we should be cautious in labeling him as such. Twain is setting him up to be a buffoon of a leader, a caricature of a leader. We should ask, which of the two is civilized? Depending on what civilized means. Which of these two is ignorant? Now, Tom knows how to read, and Huck is only learning to read. But Tom is a fool, and Huck is a realist and a pragmatist. Which of the two is a role model, and which is the leader? And what are the consequences of following such leaders as Tom? Leaders who are absolutely dependent on tradition. If Mark Twain is searching for answers for how to deal with race relations in a post-Civil War society, then following leaders who cling to tradition, there will be serious consequences of such. All right, religion and Christianity in particular are presented to Huck through Widow Douglas and Miss Watson, and Mark Twain is satirizing aspects of Christianity. The Widow Douglas and Miss Watson embody two facets of traditional religious thought. One, God the forgiver, one, God the judge. Now, the widow's God, Widow Douglas's God, is a good and loving force, the God of the New Testament, if you will. He's a forgiving figure, and Huck describes the widow's God as one that, quote, makes a body's mouth water. Huck's describing it as though it would be a yummy dessert that could make your mouth water. Now, Miss Watson's God is a stern judge who has a great deal of anger and wrath. Think Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. This God should be feared. The dichotomy, or the split between these, is too much for Huck. He can't understand how this God can be the same, because the way Widow describes it and the way Miss Watson describes it is so different. Huck is unable to accept Miss Watson's advice to do good for others when she tells him what to pray for. It seems unrealistic to him, and he, quote, couldn't see no profit in it. But that doesn't make him selfish. That just makes him practical and not realizing the cultural implications of Miss Watson's instruction on prayer. Speaking of prayer, what is significant about Huck's experiences with the fishing hooks and the tin lamps? Well, Huck says that Miss Watson tells him to pray every day, and whatever I asked for, I would get. That's what Miss Watson tells Huck. So Huck takes it practically, literally, and he prays for fishing line after finding fishing hooks, or maybe it's the other way around. I forget. Of course, he doesn't get what he prays for. Now, Tom tells Huck that he needs to rub the magic lamp, and that out of the magic lamp a genie will come. And Huck again tries it. He doesn't cast it off. He tries this, and by the end of chapter 3, he says that this magic lamp had, quote, all the marks of a Sunday school. Society, in the first case represented by Miss Watson, in the second case by Tom Sawyer, has promised something to Huck that it doesn't deliver. The first one, or the second one, is based in fantasy, the first one in religion. However, it's important to note that Huck has personally explored both. He's tried them. He is very much an individual. The character of Pap, truly terrible, wicked, awful character. The new judge's treatment of Pap is worthy of consideration. Now, Twain, in this case, is satirizing the gullibility of those whom he scorned as do-gooders. The judge just wants to do good by Pap. We as readers know that Pap is no good. There is no reformation there. This episode also is a hint of a rebirth motif, which will continue throughout the book. In terms of Pap's attitude towards Huck, Pap considers Huck his property. Pap is furious that others work to keep him from making full use of his property. But that episode raises the question of identity. Whose property is Huck? Is Huck Pap's property? Most of us would say no. And if Huck can't be the property of Pap, then how can Jim, another human being, be the property of someone else? More information about Pap here. Huck has mixed emotions about life with his father. Why? Well, he enjoys the freedom from restraint and the lack of discipline that life with Pap offers, even if there is harsh treatment, physical abuse that goes along with it. And lastly, the irony in Pap's fury about the educated black man. This loathsome, illiterate, cruel character, Pap, he expresses what he thinks is his superiority over a clean, educated black man. Pap's justification for his superiority is only based in his skin color. This is Twain's satirical comment about the black and white question, and also the affirmation of his belief that humanity and what makes a person a human of character, that is not a matter of color. Huck's intelligence. Well, he's ignorant of so many things, but let us not fool ourselves in thinking that he's an ignorant, stupid boy. The episode in which he fools Pap and get away. Need I say more? The pig's blood, the hair on the ox. He's thinking through many different avenues, and he comes up with a clever plan. In Chapter 7, Huck remarks about the June rise used to be always lucky for me. This just establishes a deep communication between Huck and the river, where Huck will spend a great deal of chapters in the middle of the book. Now, what is significant about Huck preparing his own death? Well, at a literal level, this episode is a plot device. It moves the story forward, and it shows Huck's cleverness, and it allows him to escape his father's domination and abuse and to go on to new adventures. More importantly, at a symbolic level, Huck's death is a destruction of his former self, the former self that was raised in that racist society. And so, at a symbolic level, Huck's death means that he is preparing to be, or he's ready to be, reborn. Huck has left the widow who tried to be a mother to him, and he's escaped from his brutal father, and now he's ready to embark upon life as a spiritual orphan, a nameless soul searching for meaning and identity. The chapter I Spare Miss Watson's Jim is important because it shows that Huck, vis-a-vis Jim, Huck still views Jim as property, not as a human being. Also, Huck is a boy, but he is firmly established in a position of authority over Jim, who is a man, though later in the novel, Jim will take on the father role for Huck. Moreover, this chapter introduces the major internal conflict for Huck through the novel. Is Jim the property of Miss Watson? Will Huck spare him? And then lastly, the significance of Jim's belief that Huck is a ghost. Huck says in chapter 1, I felt so lonesome, I most wished I was dead. Pap in chapter 6 calls Huck the angel of death. Huck stages his own death in chapter 7. To society, Huck is a dead man, no more identity. And in escaping civilization, Huck has escaped his former identity, but he has yet to establish a new one. I hope this was enlightening. I will see you later. Bye-bye.